Welcome, everyone. Thanks for being here today. We're glad to have you join us to learn more about and go deeper with the evidence-based practices in the Mass Literacy Guide. I'm Donna Goldstein, an ELA Literacy Content Lead at DESE. Mass Literacy Getting Started is a 6-part series to support users in accessing specific areas of the Mass Literacy Guide. Today is our 5th session. Each session features experienced educators speaking directly to their use of evidence-based practices and connecting this work to the Mass Literacy Guide. Today's focus area is around students experiencing reading difficulties. Our final session, being held Thursday, April 1st, is focused on leading a multi-tiered system of support. Many of you have asked about PDPs for these sessions. We do not offer PDPs. However, tomorrow you will receive an email confirmation of your attendance at today's 45-minute webinar. A link to a central document with registration for the remaining April 1st session and all of the resources being shown today is being dropped in the chat for you right now. You can use this link as you follow along with the presentation. This link sheet as you follow along with the presentation. As you know, this session is being recorded. You can find today's recording within a week or so on the Mass Literacy Guide landing page under the Top Resources section. The recordings of all prior Mass Literacy Guide webinars are there as well. A link to this Top Resources section of the Mass Literacy Guide is on the link sheet that was just dropped into the chat for you. If you have a question today, please use the Q&A feature. We will be monitoring this and we'll try to get to as many of your questions as we can. We'll start today with a brief introduction and overview of the focus area, while most of our time will be spent with our featured presenter, Patrick Flaherty. After Patrick presents, we will have some question and answer time, which will be moderated by my DESE colleague, Susan Kazeroid. For those of you who are new to the Mass Literacy Guide, it is a statewide effort to empower educators with the evidence-based practices for literacy that all students need. Evidence-based instruction provided within schools and classrooms that are culturally responsive and sustaining will put our youngest students on a path toward literacy for life. As part of this work, over the next several years, DESE will offer early literacy programming paired with implementation supports, including resources, professional development, and grants. Right now, you're looking at a screenshot of the Mass Literacy landing page. We have a great video featuring classroom teachers, specialists, and a couple of the researchers who advised on this work. Lots of voices, perspectives, and areas of expertise contributed. The featured speakers in the video were from among the 100+ stakeholders who advised. We engaged with research advisors from across the country and internationally, along with Massachusetts preschool and elementary teachers, administrators, and educator preparation faculty. DESE also partnered with the Massachusetts Reading Association and collaborated with the Mass Association of School Administrators, specifically working with a group of assistant superintendents. You can see the Massachusetts Reading Association logo at the bottom right of the landing page. I've circled it in red right there for you. In terms of layout, the Mass Literacy Guide is made up of 5 primary sections that are all accessible via this landing page. The sections include components of the core literacy block, skills for early reading, students experiencing reading difficulties, leading a multi-tiered system of support, and pathway to equity in early literacy. As mentioned during the welcome, the focus of today's section is students experiencing reading difficulties. Based upon feedback from prior attendees, and thank you very much for that feedback, and because this area includes so much information, today we will be taking a narrower approach and honing in on serving students who experience or are at risk for experiencing reading difficulty with foundational skills specifically. Information and resources for supporting the development of foundational skills are in several areas across the Mass Literacy Guide. But today, we'll be making connections at these particular areas: at students experiencing reading difficulties, at skills for early reading. And additionally, we'll also be spending a little bit of time showing you the data-based decision-making page which is housed right here at the Leading a Multi-Tiered System of Support section. Our featured speaker, Patrick Flaherty, will be sharing his experience with evidence-based instruction to support students who experience reading difficulties with foundational skills in just a few minutes. The resources and information he will speak to are all connected to these sections within the guide. So now we'll start to take a closer look. This is the Students Experiencing Reading Difficulties landing page. And the intent of this section is to identify common underlying causes of reading difficulty and point to instructional practices that are often beneficial for students' growth. As mentioned a few moments ago, in response to your feedback for keeping this information more focused, we will be examining one section within this area today: the foundational skills or fluent word reading side, which I have bracketed in red for you to focus on a little bit more easily. So, for example, a teacher could click on the phonological skills section to read about the profile of a child or who may be experiencing difficulty with reading because of an underlying challenge with phonological skills, and there find evidence-based practices that are effective for children experiencing this issue. This is how our featured speaker will be approaching this section today. It is really critical to note, though, that many students who are at risk for reading difficulty or who are experiencing reading difficulty may have causes in more than one area of this graphic. The interlocking pieces, the way it's represented here, are intended to convey this possibility. And this is highlighted on this slide here, where I've put the red oval around the words and or at the top of the graphic. Students can be experiencing difficulties with one or more of any of these pieces at one time. This particular section is very supportive of the work of reading specialists, special educators, interventionists, and really importantly, classroom teachers as well, since educators in all these roles work with students who are experiencing reading difficulties. We're going to take an overview of the skills for early reading page now. This section identifies the skills that contribute to early reading proficiency. And as those of you who have been joining us each week know by now, this is organized around the simple view of reading. The simple view of reading is a cognitively based theory that asserts that to learn to read, children must develop both fluent word reading and language comprehension. You might remember, if you joined us last week, that we focused on the language comprehension, or the blue side of this section. Today, the practices to support foundational skills for students experiencing or at risk for experiencing reading difficulties that Patrick will touch upon are all within this orange side of the graphic, the fluent word reading side, and include phonological skills, phonics and decoding, and automaticity. At the beginning of Patrick's remarks, he will talk about the importance of assessment for early identification and prevention of reading difficulty. Right now, you're looking at the data-based decision-making page, and this is housed in the section called Leading a Multi-Tiered System of Supports. Here, you can find guidance and resources for assessment to inform instruction. So, with this context, with this background in mind, let's get ready to meet today's featured speaker. We are really pleased to have Patrick Flaherty with us today. Patrick is a special education teacher in the Metro Boston area. Patrick served as a literacy champion, one of about 50 educators, primarily teachers with some administrators, from across the Commonwealth that were deeply involved in advising DESE on the Mass Literacy Guide. He actually appears in the video that I mentioned in the landing page a few slides ago, and he is featured on a couple of pages within the Mass Literacy Guide. Patrick has been a teacher for 8 years and is a licensed Wilson practitioner. He has his master's degree in special education and is currently enrolled in the Mass General Hospital's Reading Specialist program. He is passionate about doing all he can to improve his practice as a teacher of students who experience reading difficulties, and also about spreading the word about evidence-based practices to colleagues. He has so much to share with us today, and we really appreciate his time and expertise. After Patrick shares, we'll have some question and answer time with him, facilitated by my DESE colleague, Susan Kazeroid. Welcome, Patrick. I am going to stop sharing my screen and I invite you to share yours.
Thank you very much, Donna. Let me get this up. All right, well, I want to thank Donna and Susan and Catherine for asking me to be here today. It's really a pleasure for me to talk. And yeah, so I just want to go through this, and I just want to start out by saying, you know, I don't want anybody to get the impression that I'm trying to preach about what best practices are and it's the only way to go. My intent today is to kind of take you a little bit through my journey and how the science of reading and all the research base that is contained in this Mass Literacy Guide have really is a wonderful resource, and have really guided my practice, and I think has really helped me to improve in my work with students. So as Susan said, here's my cover page. I feel like this is the beginning of my resume here for you. So I am currently working on it's a CAS, Certificate Advanced Study in Reading, to be a reading specialist at MGH. A colleague of mine told me about the program about a year ago, and I'm so happy that I'm got involved with it. I feel like it's been a tremendous help to me, and I've gotten so much out of it. So give them a little plug. All right, so here is just a little bit about me, just a little bit about my background. And I don't want to read all these slides, as is kind of sometimes my habit. And I think some of us tend to do that sometimes, but I'll just go through this a little bit. So let me get my laser pointer up here. All right, so just me kind of in a nutshell, what got me here. English was always my preferred subject in school. I remember my favorite teacher in high school was my English teacher, probably my favorite teacher of all time. I went to a very small high school, so I actually had the same teacher for 3 years. So it was great. And then a lot of that rubbed off on me. I went off to college, and I should mention many people in my family are teachers. Kind of the expectation was, you know, I'd go to school, get my degree in English, and get into teaching right away, you know, right at 22 years old out of school. That didn't exactly happen. I took a little bit of a roundabout way. So I was an English major. And then again, I'm not going to read all this, but if you can see here, I loved my literature classes. I loved sitting around talking about books with my professors or people that were smarter than me. And I feel like I got a lot out of it, right? And I figured, oh, this is teaching high school English is just going to be the same thing, right? We sit around and talk about books. Not so much. So after my student teaching experience, you know, it wasn't exactly what I wanted it to be, I guess. And for a number of different life reasons, I didn't get into teaching right away. I was in the restaurant and retail business full-time for about 15 years. But I always knew in the back of my mind, like I say here, when I grew up, I would get back to teaching. I knew that it was there somewhere, but I knew I didn't want to be a high school English teacher. So I did a little bit of substitute teaching, just kind of get my feet wet. And I met one particular teacher who really kind of took me under his wing, and he suggested that he was a special educator. So I got to work a lot in his room when I filled in for aides in his room. And I really liked the work. And he suggested I work on my master's in special ed, and I'm so glad I did. So glad I took his advice. And then what I figured out was, you know, I love reading, and I consider myself, you know, I'm a reader, right? I like to read as much as I can. These days, it's, you know, we get busy in school and it's mostly professional reading. But I thought, you know, I think I can kind of turn that love of reading, and instead of wanting to be a high school English teacher, I could turn it into teaching kids how to read, right? Because there's kids that really struggle to learn how to read, and what a tough thing to deal with. So I thought, what a better goal, there's no more important goal in education than teaching kids to read. And I didn't want to read all these high school essays. All right, so this is just a quick, what things I'm grateful for. I'm grateful for this job. I love this job. I love working with kids. And this year especially, it's been a challenging year. And I don't want this to be a, oh, this year is so bad kind of ramble, but it's been difficult. I'm working fully remote, but this year I am lucky enough to be in a first grade and a third grade classroom, and I love it. I've never actually worked with first graders before. Typically I'm in a K-5 building. Typically I work 3, 4, 5. So it's been nice working with first graders who are all beginning readers, right? So I feel like a lot of the practices that work well for kids who struggle a bit in the older grades, that's really very similar to what we're doing with all the students in the younger years. So I feel very fortunate. I have some awesome colleagues I work with, and I'm fortunate. I feel fortunate for the opportunities that I've had. Number one, several years ago, the DESE dyslexia, I think it's officially called dyslexia, dysgraphia, and dyscalculia. I don't know if I said that right, but which is led by Melissa Orkin and Leandra Elian, and DESE sponsored it. It was a free class I got to take. I got in the lottery and I got in, and it was great. And it really kind of sparked a lot of what I'm going to talk about moving forward here today in my presentation. And then the other thing I'll mention is I feel fortunate. The first principal who hired me told me, in your first year, you have to get certified in a structured reading program. You have to. And she's told me I had to, but now looking back, I don't think I really had to, but she kind of forced me into it, and I'm glad she did. It was a lot of work, but I'm so glad I did. I was trained in Wilson in my first year, and it served me so well. And also my advisor in my graduate school, special ed graduate program, was also very supportive of me. I remember I wrote my research project on reading instruction, and he just gave me so much support and really mentored me in a lot of ways. All right, so let's get into this. This is what Donna was talking about a little bit. Sorry, I'm just moving screen out of the way so I can see. So assessment informs instruction, right? That's like a buzz phrase, and it is so important, right? We want to be driven in what we do with kids by what we assess. Find out where the weaknesses are and really attack them, really work on them. So in my current role as a special educator, the kids that come onto my plate have already been screened, right? There's already been a process that I'm sure most of the audience here understands. There is a process to identifying students with disabilities. And so they've already gone through some struggles in the classroom. Parents most definitely have concerns. And sometimes the referral is brought up, solely by the parents, but we work with them and do some assessments and figure out the best way forward. So diagnostic measures that I use, and I think are pretty common in the world of special education. Typically, I've always done the WIAT as an educational assessment. This year, one of my supervisors actually turned me on to the KTEA. She really likes it, and I've used it a couple times now, and I like the test quite a bit. So I use that to kind of tease out weaknesses in areas of reading, and also the CTOP, the test of phonological processing, that is very important to figure out where some gaps might be in a student's ability to pick up the individual phonemes in words, which we know, and I'll get into this further, that sound, being able to pick up the sounds in speech and segment them and play with them, like changing the word cat to cut. It's just one sound, but it really can be a tricky thing for a lot of kids to get automatic with. And it's a very important thing that really needs to be focused on. And one thing I've really enjoyed this year in my first grade classroom is every morning, and I'm kind of getting ahead of myself here, but every morning, I think I'll come to this in another slide, I've been doing some of the phonological awareness games, and we just call them word games for the kids. And the kids love them, and it's been great as kind of an engaging thing on Zoom every morning to get the kids going. It's the first thing they do. Hey, we're going to play word games, and everybody gets a turn to unmute and give it a chance and give it a try. So that's really been a lot of fun for me. And I really have seen the benefit. One of the students, just a quick story, one of the students I just had to evaluate the other day, he did qualify with a reading disability, which didn't surprise anyone on the team. However, it was really noteworthy that his phonological skills, and I'm not trying to pat myself on the back at all, but I really feel like his phonological skills were a little bit stronger than they would have been had he not had that training. Okay, and then the thing on the bottom here, quick phonics screener. I just wanted to mention these. You know, I talked about the diagnostic measures here, KTAA, Wyatt, CTOP. Also, things I use once I have a student on my caseload, and I do this for kind of periodic progress monitoring, very helpful writing progress notes, figuring out where to start with a student when I get them, is I really like to use, as I just mentioned, the phonological awareness screening test, which I'll talk more about the resource where you can find that. That's great. And it is free on the web too. It's a free open source resource. And I also use the quick phonics screener, which reading specialists in my school told me about years ago, and it's also free and very helpful, very beneficial, just to really pinpoint where issues may be in student skills. Okay, so today's intended audience, any educator who serves students with reading difficulties. And I say, isn't that every educator, right? I think we all, no matter what grade level you teach, if you're a public school teacher, you are going to come across students that have difficulty with reading. And this is part of that landing page that Donna mentioned earlier. And this ties right in with that simple view of reading, right? So students experiencing reading difficulties or at risk of experiencing them will have trouble with fluent word reading and/or comprehension. And then this is really what I'm going to focus in on today, really. This problems with fluent word reading also contribute to comprehension difficulties. So I'm really going to focus on what is the basis, like where do these comprehension issues come from? So this just gives a little more on the simple view of reading. It is, I remember I think, I have to be honest, I think I had heard simple view of reading, that term thrown around in team meetings, but I really didn't understand it until I took that course through DESE with Leandra and Melissa Orkin. The idea that it's a multiplication problem, right? If one is 0, then the whole thing is 0, right? So we have to have fluent word reading and language comprehension to get to that ultimate goal of comprehension. Okay, I'm going to move on because I don't want to just read every slide. And this is back to the landing page. And again, as Donna mentioned, I'm going to focus today on phonological skills, phonics and decoding, and how that can lead to automaticity and fluency. And then, of course, that does flow into higher level skills, but that's really not where I'm going to go so much today. And I'll be honest, I feel like, you know, I think we can always get better at our jobs, right? No matter what you do. But I think I feel most comfortable kind of focusing on these foundational skills because that's really a big part of what my work is. And of course, comprehension comes in. But I really believe firmly we need to really make sure students have those foundational skills intact before we throw them into higher level material. Okay, so I already talked about this a little bit. So my focus is going to be on the decoding side. But first, a few thoughts about the ultimate goal of comprehension. This is an excellent book. And as I noted down here, the authors and researchers who wrote this book, Oak Hill, Kane, and Elbrow, have all contributed to the evidence base that is contained in the Mass Literacy Guide. I learned about this book watching a webinar, or maybe it was just a recorded lecture that David Kilpatrick gave, which I'm going to get into David Kilpatrick a little bit. He's kind of like my favorite rock star in the reading world. He's just a great guy. I'd love to meet him and sit down and have a cup of coffee with him and talk reading, because he seems like just a really cool guy. And I love the way he writes. And he just kind of makes things click for me when I read his work. So I just want to point out this quote. This is a quote from the very beginning of this book. And this book is all about teaching comprehension. This is like one of the first pages of text. Some teachers are concerned that if children are taught by a sounding out / phonics approach, typically using decodable books, which might not have the most exciting storylines, then they might become overly focused on decoding at the expense of comprehension. And here's the key. However, there is no evidence for this concern. In fact, children who have early intensive training in phonics tend not only to be better at word reading later, but also have superior comprehension skills. So I really think it's so important for us to do all we can to make it so it's not boring, right? This is the skill. We need to teach kids how to balance on a bike before they're going to go for a ride, right? And excuse me, I probably will make a few more sports analogies here. That's kind of the way my brain works. But it's like you can't, and I also think about working out at the gym. You don't throw somebody into the gym and say, there you go lift as many weights as you can and see what happens. They need some training, right? So that's how I think of those foundational skills being so important. Okay, so jumping right into the first area, we're going to talk about foundational phonological skills. This is a screenshot from the Maths Literacy Guide, the phonological skills section. So this is where if you have a student who you may suspect is atypically developing as a reader, is having some issues, you might notice any number of these characteristics. Difficulty noticing rhymes, remembering how to pronounce a word when they've been exposed to it several times. And again, as I said, I don't want to read this whole thing. Figuring out syllables, but you can take a look. And I think I know we all have students that we can say, yeah, that sounds like Jimmy, or whoever it might be, right? So this is kind of the backbone, or like what words can stick to. And that was said one time in a webinar, I think I watched, it was a Reading League webinar, that the phonological skills, the better they are, it's like the Velcro that new words and new chunks of words, the graphemes, will stick to and help us remember them, and help us remember the meaning as well. Okay, so here is my favorite reading person. Again, I've never met him, but I think he'd be a cool guy to talk to. David Kilpatrick, and this is his, just a screenshot of the cover of his book. I use this quite a bit, called Equipped for Reading Success. And it's a program that focuses solely on kind of the side of the equation we're talking about today. Developing phonemic awareness, and then how you can translate that into becoming a fluent reader. And here's an example. I just typed in some things. These are kind of starting, this is kind of an easier item down to harder ones. And this is those 1 minute activities. These are the word games I play with my first graders in the morning. So basic level would be just separating a compound word. You say to the kids, say birthday. Now say birthday, but don't say birth. And we want them to say day. And what Kilpatrick will say is this needs to be automatic. I think 2 seconds or less. If it's more than 2 seconds, the child might get it correct, but it's still something to note. So you want to note if it's not automatic, and you can work on training that. Then a little bit tougher, splitting word into syllables, candy. Now say candy, don't say can, it's D. And I just did this here, and I think with this audience here, you all know what I'm talking about. These 2 slashes means this is the sound, right? It's spelled D-Y, but when you play these games, it has nothing to do with spelling. It's all about the sounds. Okay, then I don't want to read them all, but substitution here, flame, to blame, all the way down. And then these are I have these stars here. These are kind of my favorites. And when I want to connect these to the next slide. So say placed. And again, it's all about sounds. Now say it, but don't say t. So they're going to say place. Now look at that, t, but they took off an ed. Then played, they took off the d sound, but it's spelled ed, right? And then groom, that oo is spelled oo. Don't say it's grew. Now instead of O, we don't spell grew, G-R-O-O, right? But when you're playing these games, spelling is not even, the student shouldn't even have letters in front of them. You can, and I'm going to show you in a moment, you can then bring it in to illustrate and try to and really help with that, the mapping of the words. But the intent of these is just all about sounds. Okay, so I don't know if orthographic mapping, that's kind of when I was talking about the Velcro, those phonemic skills that are the Velcro that words can stick to and chunks of words can stick to, that's part of what orthographic mapping is. And this is another one of those terms, like simple view of reading, that I know I heard about probably several years, maybe before I took that DESI class. And then when I took the class, it really started to make sense to me. So I'll just read a little bit of this. It's what allows a proficient reader to instantly read any word. So that's the goal, right? Instantaneous, automatic recognition of a word. So the child can free up their mind to do the important work of comprehension. And it also can promote long-term memory of words. And this is something, it makes me think about, like when I'm a big music fan, and when I hear a song like from 20 years ago, and I know probably a lot of people can relate to this, you hear that song and it takes you back to the first time you heard it, right? So I think I'm not being very scientific in how I'm explaining this, but there's gotta be something similar here, I think, to that phonemic memory. Remembering sounds is so important for students to be able to have that skill and to automatically read a word. It all plays in. We're remembering words by their sound. And so promoting automatic word recognition, I just want to point out this point here. Reading practice is a key ingredient to develop fluent word recognition because orthographic mapping happens through reading practice. So repeated exposure. And this word of caution here, this process only initiates once children become somewhat skilled at decoding, right? So that's where that work on decoding is really important, the phonics work. So for this all to come together, the phonics skills and the phonemic awareness skills for the orthographic mapping to really take place. And then I think, well, this isn't, okay. Orthographic mapping is not possible without some phonics and decoding skills, right? Decoding ability in turn is built upon phonemic awareness. So it's kind of a cycle, right? This is why children need phonemic awareness and phonics and decoding skills before they're able to read automatically. That got cut off there a little bit. Let me turn the page. Okay, so a little bit of my practice. These are phoneme grapheme cards that I really love. Were newer to me this year. As Donna mentioned, I am trained in Wilson. These are not from the Wilson program. It's a different publisher, but they work, they're very, very adaptable really to any phonics program that you use. So these, and I teach kids, and this is something that's going to come up, is kind of teach, there's nothing wrong with telling a first grader, I'm not going to expect them to spell these words, but saying what a phoneme is. And I say phone, it's like, you know, you talk on the phone, and maybe kids these days think you just text on the phone, I guess, but phone, those sounds, right? So it's sounds, grapheme, graph is the picture are the words or the letters. So these all say ooh, all the different ways we can spell ooh. And this OO is book. So, and this is tying in, I've talked a little bit, but this is tying into those phonemic awareness activities I was talking about. So there was the word grew and the word, which was an ooh sound. And then I had, so which does not rhyme with the word book, which is OO. So that's an important thing to point out. And just, I like to be really explicit about that and talk to talk to first graders about that even. We'll work on the word games, and then I'll show them the letters and show them how they're the same letters, but they sound different. All right. Next point I want to make here. Gets back to the ED ending that we had in the Kilpatrick word games. So I'm going to tie that in here. So we know short E says eh, right? That's the only spelling, eh. D for dog, d. But also ED, like in the word played, says d. And I remember this really kind of, I remember saying this to a reading teacher one time. You know, shouldn't we got to teach the kids how ED can say 3 different things. And she looked at me like, what? And I think we don't, I think we get, sometimes reading teachers can get so caught up in just giving kids a love of reading and wanting to, you know, like me when I wanted to be an English teacher and just teach everybody to love reading as much as I do. I think that can sometimes get in the way of these kind of things, that explicit teaching that a lot of kids really need. And that's how gaps can develop. Or then T. So, okay, and here this explains it. So ED says 3 different things, right? So this is our T turtle card, but ED can also say T. And I will say this, with my first graders, when I show them these cards, I will just circle the T, or I'll cover up the ED, especially at the beginning of the year. We don't want to confuse them too much, but I think it is important for them to know that sounds can be spelled in different ways. So ED says 3 different things. It can say ed, both sounds, like loaded, or d, like played, or t, like in walked. And then, as I said, O can say 2 different things. Moon rhymes with grew, but book does not. And this is kind of my 2 cents here, and I think I've made it very clear. Some kids just don't get it. Some kids do get it, but many don't. And it's not just about the kids that are on IEPs. This is, all kids really need this. And maybe some of them got it naturally, but I think teaching them this structure is so important, and it will help them build their literacy. Okay. Another point I wanted to make, getting back to those phoneme grapheme cards. Lots of teachers, the traditional thing is to have a word wall. My suggestion, and I haven't done this yet, I'm not a classroom teacher, and this year has been crazy with remote instruction, but when I get back inside a classroom next year, I cannot wait. Whatever teachers I work with, I'm really going to encourage them to think about developing a sound wall instead of a word wall. And I'll just leave this here for a second, that comparison.
Patrick, I'm actually going to ask if you could, after you show us the Vowel Valley and the consonant wall here, would it be possible for us to kind of move on to the takeaways? Because we do have a couple of questions and we want to make sure that we have time.
Sure, no problem, of course.
You.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I knew this was, I'm ask anybody who's been in meetings with me. I tend to talk too much. Okay, so here's some examples of sound walls. Vowel Valley. And this is something I do with the first graders sometimes. We'll go right through it. There's a chart they have, and it all has to do with the how the sounds come out of your mouth. And a speech language pathologist could explain this better than I could. But it starts with I, down to the bottom of the valley is ah, and it goes up to oo. Those 2 U and oo, the 2 sounds of long U. And then there's some words underneath, as you can see this teacher set up. Long A has many different ways to spell it. E-I-G-H says A, 4 letters, 1 sound. That really blows kids away sometimes when you really point that out to them. Then these are all the consonant sounds. And I've noticed partner sounds here. This was a thing I learned this year. And again, speech language pathologists would be like, what do you mean you just learned that this year? But I have to admit, P and B, right? P, and then we turn on our voice for a B, B, and T and D. Kids really get a kick out of that when you work on it with them. And how TH really has 2 different sounds. Thumb, and then you turn on your voice, because you can feel it in your throat. like feather. So that's a really cool thing to work on with kids. Same thing with SH. You can say sh or sh. Different, they're partner sounds here, right? Okay. And here's another example of the Vowel Valley. And these are all based on spellings. Okay. Another quick thing, I just want to say this quick. This was from David Kilpatrick book. Another way to promote orthographic mapping is to have, these are all rhyme units, like the word cloak or oak. Well, oak, that's a word in itself. Or the words lick, sick. These are all chunks of words that we would like kids to pick up and get automatic with. Okay. And I'm gonna, Donna, would you like me to move?
Yeah, Patrick, if you wouldn't mind just telling us one or two of your key takeaways, and then that we do have a couple of questions that we want to make sure we get to.
Of course. All right, so key takeaways. I think it's a common misconception, and I know there's teachers in my district that would probably be angry at me for saying this, but I don't think there are different ways kids learn to read. I think there's only one way children learn to read, and that is through phonic decoding, and that crucial skill of phonemic awareness is so important. The evidence makes clear that effective way to learn to decode is through proficiency in phonic decoding. I just said that. And then kind of my idea is why do we want to just teach kids to memorize 50 sight words when we can help them become automatic at reading so much more? So it's like giving someone a fish versus teaching them to fish, in my opinion. And this is a quote from my favorite, David Kilpatrick. It's orthographic mapping proposes that we use pronunciations of words that are already stored in long-term memory as the anchoring point. I think I've said that. And to do that, a student needs the advanced phonemic awareness. And that is the phonemic proficiency. And then some ideas. This is all from Kilpatrick. As I mentioned this, I think I've mentioned a lot of these things, and that's why I've gone too long. Teach kids the vocabulary mapping. Teach them what a syllable is. They don't have to know how to spell these words, especially in first grade, but teach them what it means. Talk in the language. Teach how to map rhyme units. Hey, how do I spell head? The teacher might say, well, what vowel do you hear? Eh. The teacher will say, yes, well, check the rhyme unit wall under E, and it's spelled with a vowel team. So you've taught them what a vowel team is. EA says eh in head. Present the words orally first. It's all about sounds. And then, of course, say it again, I highly recommend this resource.
Thank you, Patrick.
You're welcome.
We're going to move on to take a couple of questions. We're running low on time, but we do want to squeeze a couple in. So my DESE colleague, Susan Kazeroid, is going to run this section. Susan and Patrick, I'm going to turn it over to you. I'll go back to sharing my screen so we get that slide back up. Thank you, Patrick.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Patrick, so much. We so appreciate it. We do have a couple questions. We have a couple around how to set up a sound wall. And can you clarify what you mean by using sound walls instead of word walls? Is this for pre-K and K? Or in classes where students need to work on phonemic awareness?
I would say, yeah, you know, and for again, I'm not a classroom teacher, but I think, yes, next year, I'm hoping I get to work in first grade again with the teacher I'm working with this year, because she's fantastic. And we've already talked about it. I think she's going to do it. And I would say K, pre-K, and then in my office, right? Students that come to see me are having difficulty with reading. That's why they're seeing me. So I would have that displayed in my office.
Great, thank you. You also you mentioned about how orthographic mapping was something that you needed to hear several times in order to kind of sink in. Yeah. Do you have any tips for educators on greater understanding of orthographic mapping?
Yeah, I think just kind of find a good article, like read some David Kilpatrick, do a Google search, David Kilpatrick orthographic mapping, and there's many other researchers too, and read it a couple times. I think repeated readings have helped me, and talk it through with colleagues. Taking that class was so important, so crucial, because I think we had an assignment around orthographic mapping and just talking about it. But I like to think that idea of the better a student's phonemic awareness is, like the stickier the Velcro is that the words will stick to, and it sticks to their memory. So that's kind of how I think of it. It's like the words are the map map of the sounds, the letters of the map.
Great, thank you, Patrick. And I know we're running out of time. So one more question, because we did have several people ask if you could share the publisher of your sound cards.
Oh yeah, it's, I will, Tools for Reading. I'll hold one up here. Tools for Reading. Yeah, they're great. I love them. It's, check out the website. There's a few videos on there that show, give examples of good practices with them. But yeah, I love it. And I know there's others that are similar, but I really like that. I think I heard about Tools for Reading in a Reading League online seminar I took last year.
Great, thank you so much. I wish we had more time. I'm going to turn it back over to Donna to wrap us up. Patrick, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Patrick. Thank you, Susan. So we have an opportunity available. We're looking for feedback on the Mass Literacy Guide in supporting early instruction for students learning English. We welcome your suggestions. If you'd like to give us some feedback, you can do so via the Mass Literacy Contact Us box that is at the bottom of the link sheet that has been dropped throughout today's presentation. Reminder, be sure to check the top resources page for the videos of previous Mass Literacy webinars and to know where to go to find this week's one. Today's will be up in the next week or so. Also, we have that one pager we've been showing each week about ways to access the guide. Links to both of these are on the link sheet that's been dropped repeatedly throughout the session. Please take a few minutes to complete the brief survey so we can be more responsive. The survey link is on the link sheet in the chat, and you'll also receive a survey reminder email with the survey link within 24 hours. You can complete it that way if you'd prefer. Your confirmation of attendance for today's 45-minute webinar is also on that email. We really appreciate your being here today. Patrick, thanks again. Hopefully you can all join us next week, April 1st, for our final session on leading a multi-tiered system of supports. If you have any further questions or comments, please submit them in the Mass Literacy Contact Us box. This concludes today's webinar. Thank you so much and take care.